All right. Well, hello, and welcome everyone to our BG5 Live. Today is July 28th, 2020. Today is episode number 63. And today we're going to take a look at trait number 31. And today what we're going to take a look at is influence. So influence in the trait 31. So let's start by saying hello to our panel. So let's start with Chris. Hey, Chris, welcome.
Hey, how's it going? I'm
Great.
really excited to be here. It's almost 100 degrees outside where we are right
Oh
now.
my goodness.
So I got my air conditioner cranked. Hopefully it won't be too loud. But welcome everyone.
Wow. Well, welcome. And Rob, welcome.
Hey, everybody. So glad to see you in here. Chris, it looks like Texas and Oregon have changed weather today. So it's rainy here. Or actually, I'm sorry, you're in Washington.
I'm in Washington now. Same thing. It's kind of the same weather.
It's not 100 here, so I'm grateful for that. Glad to be here, everybody.
Yes, great to have you, Rob. And Natalie is vacationing in Paris right now, so she's on vacation. Leanne was going to try to join us, but she's making hay while the sun shines, literally. So she's actually making hay because the sun is shining. So she's not able to join us here today. And my name is Karen Sherwood, and welcome to our BG5 Live. So welcome to everyone here who is live in our BG5 live Zoom room, and also those that are joining via Facebook and those that are watching us via the recording. Again, like, subscribe, and we love to have you join us. So thank you for being here. So let's take a look at trait 31, taking a look at this influence. Now, as we have been continuing through our journey, through the 4 collective traits that ends the journey of form, remember we did take a look at details a couple of weeks ago. This is the voice of I think. This is about the facts. Last week, we took a look at the trait of stimulation in the 56, about stories and about I believe. And today, we're going to take a look at influence. So once again, we are taking a look at one of the voices, and this is the voice of the elected leader. This is the voice of influence. And then next week, we will take a look at the other side, which is all about retreat. And what is very interesting here, you can see we have retreat, and then in the following week, we return back to what is actually the opposing trait to trait 31, which is the 7, which is all about the leader as well. So we're in sort of this, it's interesting, there's sort of this transition time, really taking a look at the leader, taking a look at influence, taking a look at leading us into the future. And it's interesting that we're now going to be moving in, once we get to the 7, we're going to be moving into taking a look at purpose fulfilled through bonding, through connection, through relationship. So we're headed towards that here shortly. So again, we're still focused here on communication. And again, we're taking a look at communication and influence in the 31. I also find it quite interesting. This is the chart for today. If we take a look at the opposing trait, 231 with the grounding and balance, we can see that it's trait 41. What's interesting about trait 41 is this is the start codon. This is about beginnings. Not only that, if we take a look at the 53 in communications, right, the 53 is also about beginnings. So what we're starting to talk about is, in a sense, starting a new narrative, starting to talk about things in a slightly different way. So there's something new on the horizon. And also, I found it very interesting that the 51 happens to be in the maturing energy. And if you remember what 51 is all about, 51 is about shock. It's about initiation. So that is something that is maturing currently as well. So just a quick weather forecast on what's happening today, what the theme of the day is. It's also interesting that we've had this strength here for quite a while, and really understanding this creative process and really tapping into our own inner knowing. So there's a pressure to know, and that pressure to know is on our inner knowing. So just a little bit about what's happening today and sort of the influences that we may be feeling. Rob or Chris, I don't know if there's anything else that you would like to add.
I don't have anything right now.
No? Okay.
No. Yeah,
All
you
right.
covered it beautifully.
All right, well, let's continue then. So let's dive in and really start to take a look. Here's the 41 and the 53. Let's start to take a look at all kinds of little errors. You think it's like a third quality day here. So I'll just start with this one since this bullet happens to be up already. But if we take a look at trait 31, this is leading. This is the voice of I lead. And I thought it was very interesting. It's, you know, when money is the energy used to move a person into a position of power, instead of the cooperative will of the people, the collective's overall ability to ensure humanity's future is easily perverted. So, you know, this is part of the description of what trait 31 is all about. So I think it's an important thing to kind of pay attention to as we take a look at our leaders, and specifically as we take a look at our elected leaders as well. You know, it is, when we take a look at trait 31, if you have trait 31 in your design, you are designed to be influential and to provide leadership towards a future direction. This is what gives us security moving forward into the future. And if you think a lot of what leadership is all about, you know, being able to provide some kind of security to move forward confidently into the future. This is I lead. And again, this is the voice of I lead. So this is I lead, meaning influencing others for good or not. So by effectively transferring your vision for a new and trustworthy pattern that will secure the future, but it is not heard until it is backed by the energy of the majority. So it's very interesting as we take a look at the 37, as we take a look at the 31, also connected with the 7, which was going to be, we'll be seeing that in a couple of weeks. This is really the strength of the elected leader, right? This is not leading because you want to lead. This is leading in service of the collective, leading in service of being backed by the energy of the majority. This is a leadership strength. And this is the leadership strength of democracy, right? So having the energy of the majority behind you, this is a projected trait and a projected strength. So it does need to be recognized and invited to lead. So your leadership must be recognized and invited. Therefore, your potential for influence works best as an elected leader. So it's interesting, you know, just again, taking a look at what's happening in the world and you know, questioning a lot of decisions and a lot of our leaders right now. The focus is really, I think really in the next few weeks, the focus is going to be on leadership. Even in the 33 is also one of the leadership strengths as well. And this is leading through I remember, which is what we're going to be moving into. So again, really taking a look at what is leadership, how does leadership work, and the importance of leadership being backed, especially with this particular strength, being backed by the energy of the majority, again, being recognized and invited to be a leader. So Chris and Rob, would love to hear your input, or if there's anything from our forum area as well. You want to start, Chris?
Oh, sure. So I love this last one where it says the money, where money is the energy used to move a person into a position of power instead of the cooperative will of the people. So basically, if somebody is put into a leadership position because of money or because of politics or something like that, and it wasn't, especially in a country such as the United States or other countries where they have a, and I'll use this, democracy, and air quotes, a theoretical or practical democracy, we see what happens. It doesn't, the person's voice does not have the same power You could see this in a company as well, in a corporation. You could see this even, I'm thinking about it in families. Like think about families where you have a blended family and you have a step parent who comes in, you know, and the kids are like, I didn't vote for you, you know, I'm not listening. So, so yeah, this is a really, it doesn't have to just be money, but it has to do with the power, and where is the power moving somebody in there. And, you know, especially because this is a small team trait, business skill, we definitely are going to see this in terms of teams and looking at how team dynamics. So
Yep.
this is a big one. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And yes, Rob.
So yeah, I have a few things to say on this actually. So I actually have the 31, and I wish that someone would have told me when I was younger, especially in business, that this needed to be invited, that I needed to actually be an elected leader first. Otherwise it might fall on deaf ears, because I could just look back now. I mean, if we were able to like play back the video on like some spoofs or something of like me trying to lead my parents, or me trying to lead the rugby team at Metro in Denver, or me trying to lead, you know, literally just stepping up and saying, you know, I'm going to lead here. I you know, sadly, when you read about this a little bit further, and it talks about, you know, when the 31, the trait of influence, doesn't have the 7 on the other end, it often feels like its voice is just kind of lost in the crowd, you know, lost in the group. And so I've felt that way a lot of times in my career. Now, on the flip side, when I have been elected, when it has been granted to me by the majority, it was, oh my gosh, beautiful. It was artistic. It was aesthetic. Not only what I was communicating to the group, but what we were communicating as a team, and how we were moving forward together as a unit. Back in 2000, when I was managing a production facility, and I was managing 12 people, things just within 6 months miraculously changed and got really, really good. And it promoted me up to getting my own production facility. And, you know, it was because I was elected to lead, and I stepped up and said, you know, here we go. But it was about the group. You know, it says it in the text, where it's a cooperative will of the people. And so I would sit down with each person individually and find out from them, hey, what do you want from this whole experience, right? And then I'd collect all of them together, put my thoughts, the direction, everything together, and boom, we would lay it down.
Yep. Yeah, beautifully shared, Rob. You know, and again, the power of this, and realizing that, you know, when it is done correctly, right, that's where it's really, its true power shows up. And as Chris was saying, you know, in a small group, it's one of the small group skills. This is actually the skill of administration, right? So being able to see what needs to happen, making sure that everybody has their role, making sure that everybody knows what they need to do. It's also about customer service in a small group as well, right? It's basically, once things are sold, making sure that, you know, that there is a flow, that people are handled, that people feel involved, that people feel connected. And that influence, right? We typically think of the elected leader as someone, you know, somebody that's visible, but the influence can also be influence that's behind the scenes as well. So we have to be aware of that also. Beautiful. Is there anything? I see a few things in the chat area. I don't know if there's anything on Facebook as well.
There are actually. So Nina was just mentioning that she has the 31 as well, and that, you know, even in her family gatherings, she's always the one who's asked to be the hostess for games and leading. And then, you know, Belinda also has the 31 as well. She mentioned that she hasn't paid much attention to it, so I'm sure she's really enjoying this conversation right now.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Yeah. So again, just kind of taking a look at, and this is, like I said, something to take a look at over the rest of this week. We're actually in quality 5 right now, which we'll talk about in just a moment. So we're going to be moving into the 33. here soon. But again, I think, you know, the next couple of weeks are really going to be focused on leadership and, you know, what is going to be successful moving forward into the future. Next week, we're going to take a look at, you know, what has been in the past, right? So if we take a look at these as two opposites, the 31 being taking a look into the future and the 33 taking a look at the past. So something to really pay attention to over this next week. Now we are in trait 31, we are in quality number 5. And 5 is very interesting. This is about self-righteousness. And remember, when we take a look at quality 5, this is about the messenger. So this is the lack of external influence guaranteed by attitude. And remember, there's something very unique about the 5, that the 5 is really there to jump in, you know, make a difference in a time of crisis and step away. That's why I put this sort of Superman here, right? Because that's what Superman does, is that he comes in, right? He fixes things for that moment and then steps away. So if we take a look at what the elevation here, it's a specialization that demands that one leads themselves, right? So taking responsibility for leading yourself. A natural specialization that only develops in isolation. However, when the development is complete, the extremely difficult and generally impossible task of externalizing the influence. So again, this is more of like, you know, it's not needed all the time, but it is needed in times of crisis. And so it is, in a sense, being able to externalize this specialization when it is needed. But that's why it's a generally impossible task if you're trying to force it. But if you're there and you're needed, right, then that's where it really has an impact. And if we take a look at the challenge is the lack of ambition, where one is content to lead oneself. A deep focus on personal experience that is self-fulfilling and has no external ambition. So this is someone who leads themselves that, you know, isn't really interested in externalizing what they know. They're happy just, you know, being the leader and having that no ambition, in a sense, to get it out there. So yes, Rob.
So I've seen this actually, especially the challenge. A couple of people that I worked with in the past come to mind. You know, it's that sales leader. It's that person that they seem to put up just extremely high sales numbers year in and year out, but you never see a group form around them. They're kind of off to themselves, right? They want to, quote, stay low and make dough. It's interesting. I didn't realize that was the challenge, but then when you read it, a couple examples from my professional past came to mind for sure. And it's interesting too, like, and you see this in organizations where it's not so much that the person who might be staying low and making dough, who doesn't want to, you know, lead others, it's not a personal thing. However, sometimes I think that when leaders aren't able to influence that person to kind of spread the wealth, spread the message, hey, please share what you're doing with the group so we can duplicate this. And when they don't, sometimes it's looked at, that leader that's trying to get that to happen, kind of takes it personally, and it's looked at as well, like, you know. But then I think after a while too, that executive is probably just happy enough to have one person who is knocking the cover off the ball and doing really well, so to speak.
Yeah. Yep. Really great example, Rob. Yeah. Thank you for that. How about for you, Chris?
Well, mine is in the first line. So, but I want to share a couple notes that we have here. Belinda says she has the 5th line too, and she can relate to the challenge, but I'm happy to lead or guide when asked. And Debbie is sharing, she said she has the 31 conscious and unconscious. I'm not sure what line quality she has, but she says, it makes so much sense to me. When my son died by suicide, I just took charge of everything that needed to be done. He lived in Arizona, so I had to get the family to Arizona, plan his move, work with his employer, just completing the lead during the crisis, and then stepped aside after the immediate stuff was complete. And just that ability to come in. Oh, she does have line 5. So yeah, So where she just get in there, like we've got, and it really, I love this Superman because I think it's a lot like that, right? It's this natural specialization. It develops in isolation. Guy lived in a cave, you know, well, I mean, that was Batman too. They all live in like some weird cave or something. And then they come out, it's like, oh, I got the, you know, I'm getting a signal. I got to go do something. And then retreats back out of there. And so it's, yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. And they're collective. They're there to help others and to serve, you know, right. Serve others. So.
You know, and it's interesting, this generally impossible task of externalizing influence, right? It's almost like it's not needed. So it's kind of impossible if you try to force it, but when it's needed, you know, boom, 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 right? You have Clark Kent, you know, he's just a, you know, kind of nerdy reporter. And then, you know, when he's needed, you know, for these nearly impossible tasks, right? He can use that influence to make a difference.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
So Chris, Mina in the room is interested to hear more about your Quality One experience, if you're willing to share.
I'm looking it up because I don't have it memorized.
Oh, here.
It says influence cannot exist in a vacuum. So it's the natural expression of leadership, or the absorption, and then in the challenge is the absorption of light that in darkness can only promise manifestation. So the unnatural expression of leadership. And for me, it's unconscious in an undefined communication and action. And what I have seen is that, like, I naturally can lead. I naturally can when it's correct. And I do have it just simply in the exaltation, in the higher expression of it. But I will say that there are times when, again, because it's unconscious, that I will find myself saying what is the thing that needs to be done in order to lead. And then, and like almost channeling it. And then everybody around me goes, okay, well, we vote you to do that. You just said it. So therefore you are now crowned the queen of doing whatever XYZ is. And I'm like, what did I just say? What did I just lead everybody to? And so there's this the interesting thing that happens for me, because it is so natural and because I can step right in. Yeah, and Nina says, yes, I can relate to that. Yeah, it's fascinating. And in a team, and the team that I am in is my family, and I carry the 31. And so I am sort of seen as the administrator of how the plan is going to go, even if I don't know what the plan is, even if there isn't a plan. And so I often find myself in this very uncomfortable lack of foundation, because remember, our first line is always about foundation, place of going, okay, what's the foundation here if I'm going to lead something? And then, I tend to default to that, like, I'm out, I don't really want to lead this party, I'm gone. So it's an interesting thing, and yet everybody looks to me to lead, and I'm going, what are you looking at? Like, don't look at me. So I get voted, but I don't sometimes know that I'm actually voted.
Oh,
it's more of an expectation.
Right.
And so, and that may have to do with my fifth line projection of, to put on me, but I don't know. Yeah.
I have a quick question for both of you.
Yeah.
This question just came up in what you were articulating. Do y'all think that, because there's those scenarios where we're all standing around waiting for someone to do something, but no one's saying anything, but it's kind of implied. Would that equal an invitation, Chris, for you to step up and say, all right, man?
What happens to me is that I will naturally do that. I will naturally come in and do that. When my kids were younger, and this wasn't even like everybody standing around looking at it. Like, it was more like there'd all be all these moms at the park, you know, and the little kids are playing on everything. And, you know, I always had one eye. I mean, as a mom, we always have one eye on what's happening, and a dad probably too. But, you know, but sometimes moms would be so lost in their conversation and they're really not watching the kids. And I would find myself like two kids, you know, in a situation where they could get hurt or about to run out into the street, or they're hurting each other. They're not even my kids. And I would find myself like, I'd be like, you know, I might yell across the playground at these kids, or like get in there and like say something. And I'm not even, I wasn't invited, and yet I was called. And what's interesting is that very rarely the kids would listen immediately, and the moms would, they might give me a little dirty look, but I never had anyone ever come to me and say, how dare you, you know, parent my child in this moment? Because I wasn't parenting. I was like, intervention needed, safety, blah, 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 you know, and it was just like, whew, I'd say it and then I was done. And, and I always wondered like, oh my God, where did that come from? But I think it was that. And Belinda says, oh my God, I do that too. And I don't have any kids and I still do that. Yeah, exactly. We'll be like, I'll be like strong arm, you know, like same here, no kids. And Nina says that, same here, no kids. And it is, it's like this, you know, we see, and yet it's almost as if there is something that calls us to lead in that moment. And what I noticed is that when we're all standing, when you're, you know, Rob, the example you were using, when there's a lot of people that are all just sort of like toeing the ground, like, okay, you know, and it's like the show Survivor, where it's like, you watch it every time. The person who nominates themselves, who steps into leadership initially strongly in, is usually one of the first ones to be voted off the island. You know, like if they're the ones that kind of step in, they're like, okay, well, nobody else is going to do it. I'll lead. And it's like, kiss of death, man, you're out. You are gone. And so, but the ones who quietly lead, and everyone sort of, they might make a little suggestion, a little here. It's like people start to look at them and they get voted by their recognition. They're also the ones at the very end who may be voted off depending on their alliances, because of, you know, that's the way the game goes. But
right. You know, it's very, very interesting also what you're saying, Chris, is that, you know, there's a natural, people naturally listen to you and naturally take your guidance and naturally take your leadership, whether you want it or not.
Yeah.
But the other thing about leadership is that leadership can also be polarizing in many respects as well. You were just talking about being voted off. It can be polarizing because, again, it is to the will of the majority. And so if, you know, if the will of the majority, for example, you were talking about Survivor, end up voting you off, right? Then you're no longer there.
Yeah.
And it can be really difficult being a leader, because people, to be a leader, you also need to learn to accept criticism, because you cannot please everyone. Remember, it's the majority, it's not everyone, you know, so you're always going to have those that appreciate and love you and love what you're doing. And you're always going to have an opposition as well. It's just part of the dynamics. I mean, what we see, you know, here in the United States with this two-party system, it's really, you know, kind of built into this, you know, into this particular strength, into this particular design where, you know, there's, you know, you have the majority and it's the majority that rules. But again, if you have a majority, you have a lot of others that do not agree. So it can be very, very difficult, and you have to have a bit of a thick skin in being a leader, because you will never, ever, ever be able to please everyone.
Yeah, exactly. And this where it comes back to the fifth line quality, where, you know, the fifth line really is in many ways the epitome of the leader, or the messenger. right? I mean, a leader is often a messenger. If they're not the one that's actually saying the message, they're the ones that are inspiring others to live up to the message in a way. And so the fifth line, I totally get that, you know, it has to retreat. It's sort of like, you know, I don't really want to, I'm just going to do this for me. Like, I don't, I don't really want to stand out there too much. And I get that. I understand that myself.
Yeah, it's very interesting that the next trait that we're moving into is of retreat, right? So,
yes, exactly.
So we have the leadership, and then we have the retreat in the 33. Very interesting.
And I have that one. I'm all like, is it time to retreat yet? I think I'm just gonna go over here.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to hear from you, Rob, too, because you also have the 31 as well.
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm finding interesting just in this conversation that I don't know that I paid as close of attention to prior to this conversation is one that, and so for those of you that are watching, either live or recorded, we all just wrapped up the first cycles class, and cycles teaches you about different milestones in your life. It could be the 30 years, the 40 year, the 50 year, the 60 year, and so on. And then there's annual cycles as well. And from this class, I learned more about the significance of the future and past direction. So where Karen has this square around the 31, that P stands for past direction. And so this is, you know, it's not like you reach a point where all of a sudden there's a sign in the road that says you now switch from future to past, because it's kind of the same road. And I know that kind of sounds crazy, but when I look back on my life, I can definitely see that. And you know, that I'm moving into a new phase. I don't feel the compulsion to lead, so to speak, or to show up as the leader. But when I do, it'll probably have a different flavor and it'll show up in a different way. And then interestingly, mine shows up as the second line quality. And for those of you that don't know what that means, just let me clear that really quickly. So each one of these traits on the left and the right, they have 6 different ways that each one of them can show up, just further demonstrating the depth that we can go into in BG5 and human design. And for me, this one shows up as arrogance, which it's very telling, because I have been arrogant in the past confession time. You know, poor sportsman, you know, like beating somebody and kind of like rubbing their face in it, or, you know, getting the promotion over somebody else and just kind of like, see, that'll teach you, or, you know, don't try to compete with me, and so on. But I just found that to be interesting, that it didn't really, I hadn't looked at it that way until today from this conversation, from all the things that we've been talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so if you have it, sounds like we have several people who have this particular trait in their design. You may have, for example, I have the 7, but I don't have the 31, right? So, you know, so I can create plans, which is part of the 7 as also a leader, but I may not be able to necessarily have that same kind of influence, or be able to administer things in the same way as well. So really fascinating to look at. So again, really over the next few weeks, I would say pay attention to our leaders, whatever country you're in, wherever you are, really pay attention to the leaders. And are they serving the collective or not? Right? This is leadership for good or not, leadership for good or bad. So I would really pay attention to our leaders, especially in the news, and pay attention also to how you lead and how you're designed to lead, and if you're getting recognized to lead or not. So really, really fascinating. And we do have our celebrity here. I don't know if any of you know Ken Burns. He's a documentary filmmaker. He makes some amazing documentaries. And so he's an American filmmaker, and he's known for his style of using archival footage and photographs in documentary films. So he's widely known for the documentary series of the Civil War, of baseball, jazz, the war, Prohibition, the Vietnam War, country music. And it's really the way he puts together the images and tells the story, is really fascinating. So if you take a look at what the life work theme is, it's of the alpha, a powerful leader who impacts others by resolving issues of survival on the material plane. You are looking for the practical solutions that secure the future. And, so in a sense, it's securing the future by also taking a look at what's happening in the past. You'll also notice he has the 33 as well. And he has the 56. So he is the storyteller, right? So we took a look at the 56 not too long ago. And he has, or actually last week, not too long ago. And he has the 31 as well as the 33. So being able to tell the stories through images of the past to be able to get us in tune with the past to be able to move us forward into the future. And that's one of the things in BG5 that we often take a look at how the 31 and the 33 really work together, that the 33, along with the 13, right, that entire strength really helps ground the past and allows the past to then inform how to move forward successfully into the future. It's how do you recognize those patterns so that you can move forward successfully into the future. So they really, the 33, which we'll take a look at next week, as well as that 31, really work hand in hand in that way. And, interesting in BG5, they are, in a sense, the customer outreach. So they almost, if you take a look at the Penta, they're almost like the hands. They work hand in hand, sort of literally as well. Very interesting. Anything, Rob or Chris, that you would like to add here? I don't know if you're familiar with Ken Burns at all, but
I've heard his name. I've probably seen one of these and just didn't kind of put it together, but Debbie on Facebook says he does a great job through all his programs, like really, really good. And I do want to, a quick one, Angela asked, how does the 31 compare to the 21? And she says she has the 21.5 and the 21.6 consciously, which she was informed was to be in control. And they're really coming out of two different areas. Angela, stay tuned next semester in Foundation 2. We're going to really dive into all the traits and you'll start to get it even more. So 31 isn't about being in control. It's different. Yeah, it's different. So it has a totally, one's more tribal, one's collective. It's very, they're coming from different places.
Yeah. And think of what control, again, if you're taking a look at what we've been talking about today with control and the 31, it comes from representing the people. It comes from the, and providing influence based on what the majority wants, right? And again, this can also be influence behind the scenes as well, whereas the 21 really wants to be in control, and be recognized for that control. The influence isn't necessarily the leaders that we see. So
That's
just be
true.
aware of that as well, because there's a lot of people who lead from behind the scenes. So something to be aware of as well.
Yeah, I would say there's many, many people that lead from behind the scenes, and that many of the people that we see who are in those positions of leadership are in some ways, figureheads for that. And it has a lot to do with who are the people that are speaking, who have their ear, who have the leader's ear.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And he's an innovator as well. Exactly. Very, very cool. All right. Well, again, it was great hearing from Rob and both Chris, who both have the 31 and their experience with that. If you are fairly new to human design and specifically BG5, we invite you to check out our website. You can get a free report to understand your career design. You can go to bg5businessinstitute.com. Also, if you scroll down on the home page, you'll see BG5 Live. You can see a picture of that here. this is where you'll find what the trait is for the day, basically what the theme of the day is all about. So you can follow along. You can also view our past episodes in the free resource library. You can also find us on YouTube as well. And we have classes coming up in September. So it's about a month and a half out. We have new classes coming up. So I recommend if you're new, to check out the BG5 foundation course. That's the great place to start to really get a foundation in what all of this is. So invite you to join us. And also you can attend the first class free as well. So I invite you to check that out. All right, so this wraps up another episode of our BG5 Live. And what I'd like to do is just wrap up to see if there's, first of all, any questions, and then anything, Chris or Rob, that you have to say, just for people to pay attention to be aware of, to be present to in taking a look at trait 31.
Sure. So really quickly, Tanya asked a great question, and I want to just elaborate. I did type the answer in, but I want to elaborate a little bit more. So in BG5, on the right and the left, for the conscious and the unconscious traits, instead of using the planetary symbols, because BG5 is the career and business application of the human design system, we've given it more everyday language. Hope that that makes sense. And of course, you'll get to learn more about this as you step onto the different courses, to each one of their meetings, their meanings, and their planetary relationships. With regard to the leadership aspect, I just want to echo what Karen had to say. Watch your leaders this week, and then see if it's about the will of the people, or if it's the will of their ego, or whatever else, and just pay attention to that.
Yeah, thank you for that, Rob. And Chris.
Yeah, I would say to everyone who has, well, everybody's activated in this, at least for a little bit, a couple more days. But if you have this trait defined, whether it's like mine in an undefined function, and unconscious again, or it is defined and it's part of a strength, just recognize where are you voting yourself in as a leader, and kind of jumping in there, and how does that feel in your body? What are the results that are coming from that? And yeah, because remember, this isn't a projected circuitry, and so it needs to really be invited or voted in, if you will. And so what do you notice when you speak out of turn, or when you volunteer something, or you hear yourself say something and then go, oh, guess I got to do that now? Not necessarily. So remember, there is a lot of administration that can happen in this trait as well. So that'd be just a way to play with it, to notice this energy. And again, notice the leaders, whether they're voted or not. Notice leaders in families everywhere. Just even at the grocery store, notice how people speak to one another. You'll start to see a pattern there. It's interesting.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah.
And, a lot of times, we talked about leaders also operating behind the scenes. Sometimes it's also, if we take a look at our own design, and we can lead by example. We can lead by simply being ourselves, and we can influence people by simply being ourselves. And oftentimes that recognition comes from you not trying to be a leader, right? It comes from you just being you. Right? And people seeing qualities within you that they recognize as a leader. So therefore it becomes recognized and invited. The more that you're aligned, the more people will, especially if you have this trait, that it's something that people will naturally recognize, and it'll naturally be called forth from you. And it may be unconscious, and you go, oh, why are people recognizing me as this? But once you realize that, right, you don't have to force it. You don't have to try to make it happen. And, when you are recognized and invited as a leader, you still It doesn't mean since you're recognized and invited that you necessarily have to say yes, right? It's also trusting your decision-making strategy to know if that leadership position is correct for you or not. So definitely over this next week, pay attention to you as a leader, to pay attention, as Chris said, leaders all over the place, right? Our elected leaders, but leaders in our family and in our everyday lives as well. And it's really a time, I think, like I said, in the next few weeks to really contemplate, what is leadership? Why do we need leadership? And who makes a good leader and what makes a good leader? I think it's really important for us to start to contemplate what that is all about, especially as we move forward into 2027. What does, what leadership actually does work, and what leadership does not work. I think it's just an important thing for each of us to kind of take a look at, both for ourselves as leaders, but also taking a look at the leaders around us. All right, everyone, it has been fabulous, really, really great input. And thank you for everyone who contributed as well. And next week, we will be taking a look at the opposite. So we'll be taking a look at the 33. All right. So take care, everyone. Love yourself and be uniquely you. And make sure you're following your decision-making strategy as you lead. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
See you next week.